The sun rose lazily over the emerald fields of Veralia, its rays glinting off irrigation towers and glass-roofed classrooms where children traced constellations they believed were only stories. In the peace that had blanketed the colony for over a century, even the concept of threat had become academic, something to theorize about, not something to fear. The people lived with open gates, unshielded skies, and untrained hands.
Veralia had been Earth's forgotten Eden, a planet of symbiotic growth and poetry, where war had become myth and security a faded chapter in ancestral records. That silence was broken at 03:17 local time. Without warning, the sky fractured, ripped.
Opened by coordinated orbital strikes that turned the clouds into plumes of burning metal. Verelia's ground quaked under the descent of Thalnari shock troops, tall, insectoid warriors wielding weaponry designed for planetary cleansing. Crops became ash. Educational sanctuaries became cinders. Their command vessels, shaped like obsidian, spears, blotted out the stars they had once charted. In the midst of the chaos, systems analyst Ray Dana bled from a shrapnel wound, her face illuminated by the flickering emergency lights of the central relay dome. She bypassed melting consoles and manual overrides with trembling fingers, each keystroke an act of defiance. Around her, the Verelian command hub disintegrated under a hail of sonic detonators. Her final act was not one of vengeance, but one of hope. Uploading encrypted footage, telemetry logs, and biometric records into a hardened data pod sealing it in a zero-velocity launcher pointed toward the Helios corridor. She whispered into the transmission interface, her voice faint over static. "We were not warned, but you must be ready." The pod launched seconds before the relay dome collapsed, in on itself. Ray did not survive the firestorm. She never heard the pod puncture Verelia's upper stratosphere, or that its deceleration engines functioned perfectly. She didn't live to know that her dying message would travel for 9 days through unlit space, carrying within it not just proof of genocide, but the key to reawakening Earth's sleeping wrath. The Thalnari did not linger. They did not colonize, did not pillage. They erased. Veralia became nothing more than a whisper in background radiation, another anomalous energy loss for astronomers to puzzle over. But the pod survived. Its hardened shell pierced the gravitational curtain of Earth's core nexus, buried deep beneath the Southern Ocean. There, in silence older than any government, the last unbroken node of Earth's defensive protocol blinked. Green for the first time in 2 centuries. An operator who hadn't drawn breath in 40 years stirred awake in cryostasis. Marshal Rick's Calder rose from the depths of memory and pain, wrapped in the uniform of a world that had promised never to need him again. He stood before the Corps' black altar, placed his hand upon its shimmering console, and whispered the phrase that had only been written into legend: Protocol Obsidian. The stars shivered. Beneath every major city, launch silos long thought to be myth opened like blooming steel flowers. On Pluto's far orbit, a massive shell of ice cracked along its seams, revealing a dormant artificial intelligence that pulsed with ancient blue light, Archon. And aboard Earth's highest orbital command station, a ghost returned to life. Commander Lyra Vance stepped forward from the shadows of disgrace. Branded a war fanatic in an age of peace, she had vanished into the margins, forgotten, perhaps intentionally. Now she walked with solemn purpose toward her warship, the Halcyon Wrath, its hull groaning awake like a titan from legend. "They mistook our silence for death," Lyra murmured, her fingers tightening around the worn insignia badge she'd kept hidden for 20 years. She looked up at the stars, not with wonder, but with fury. The war had not started with warning, but Earth would respond with history, fire, and memory sharpened into blade. As her ship disengaged from Earth's orbital dock and moved toward the rising armada, a low hum echoed across the system, Oblivion Core's activation signal. Unseen for generations, Earth's last weapon had stirred. What had been taken from Veralia would not be mourned quietly. The dead had spoken. Now the living would scream. 9 days after Virelia's last breath, the solar system began to shudder, with coordinated ignition. Deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Trench, Earth's core nexus surged with ancient energy signatures, reactivating command matrices sealed since before the conquered wars. Orbital bunkers rose through cloud layers, like steel obelisks, and satellite clusters once believed to be obsolete civilian hardware began reconfiguring into encrypted battle arrays. On the icy moon of Eris, sleeper drones blinked online and beamed encrypted telemetry toward Earth's moons, where the Lunaran outpost lit up with a fury not seen since the foundation of the Earth core Concord. In the control chamber of the ICE, Halcyon Wrath Commander Lyra Vance stood before a holographic display of Virelia's annihilation, her face impassive yet carved with tension beneath the surface. The AI Archon, newly reawakened, its voice measured like poetry in storm, flickered beside her in the shape of a rotating construct of light and fractal glyphs. The broadcast from Ray Dana has triggered 87 strategic nodes. Earth's silence is broken, it said, its tone both reverent and ominous. Lyra moved with swift precision, her voice clipped and lethal. Assemble the fleet. Pull the auxiliaries from Vanta Reach. I want Gale V's pulse cannons and Lunara's interceptors. Ready for void breach, no more diplomacy. As the bridge around her surged into life, crew members running coordinated startup protocols and weapon systems growling with unburied power, she felt the weight of the past clawing at the present. Marshal Rix Calder, now stationed on Earth's High Command Relay, patched in with his signature gravel tone. You were right, Lyra. All those years ago when you screamed about the danger of silence, we just didn't listen. Lyra didn't blink. Listening now won't bring Virelia back. Beyond Mars, Earth's sleeper fleets emerged from stealth hangars carved into the crusts of forgotten moons. The devastation wards, built in secret during the Armistice era, powered up with weapons capable of planetary denial. AI war mines linked in an ancient dance of combat logic. Above Neptune's orbit, the Oblivion core cracked free from its ice-bound slumber, revealing a colossus of dark alloy and starlit engravings, its scale impossible to measure, its hunger undeniable. Inside the Wrath's war room, Archon interfaced with the core's partial consciousness, warning Lyra of what was stirring. The Thalnari are pawns. Their energy signatures are erratic, their movements reactive. But something beneath their warpath echoes a pattern we haven't seen since the Nullian fragment. That name sent a chill through the command deck, though no one dared speak. Lyra gave the order anyway. We don't wait. Set trajectory. For the Perida Belt, strike their outer colonies, cut their lines, let them feel the teeth of Earth again. The coalition formed faster than anyone had predicted. Ships from Gale Fifth with their ice-forged plating and lunar kinetic lances, solar-hardened corvettes from Vanta Reach burning red with revenge, Lunara's stealth skirmishers blinking in and out of phase. They were united not by treaty but by grief, and by the iron call of Protocol Obsidian. In the shadow of Jupiter's gravitational fields, the fleet moved with lethal symmetry. Lyra stood alone in the forward viewport, eyes locked on the void ahead. We lost our home once, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. We won't lose it again, not to the Thalnari, not to anything. As they breached into enemy territory, the first engagement came without warning. A Thalnari siege cruiser emerged from behind a collapsing moon, its hull bristling with entropy missiles. But Earth's ships didn't flinch. Archon interfaced with all allied vessels, its voice folding across channels like scripture. Enemies of the silence, prepare to be erased. Plasma-laced lances surged from Earth's capital ships, carving through Thalnari hulls like heat through glass. The vacuum was filled with the light of vengeance. On board the Wrath, Lyra watched the enemy disintegrate and gave the next order without hesitation. This was only the gate. Now we burn their house. Behind them, the Oblivion core opened, like a flower of death, releasing a wave of antimatter light so pure it erased the last remaining Thalnari beacon in that sector. The past was over. Earth had awoken. The wrath of silence was now a war cry. The Thalnari Dominion had built their empire on whispers, conquering worlds in the shadows, counting on the myth of Earth's pacifism to remain true. But Earth's silence had been a blade, sheathed and buried, not broken. By the third week of Earth's return to war, Thalnari strongholds in the Perida Belt were reduced to magnetic wreckage, drifting along scorched orbital trails. Commander Lyra Vance led from the front with cold precision, her tactics legendary. 3 jump maneuvers that folded space-time to flank enemy armadas, mass driver traps that turned asteroids into artillery, and psychic jamming waves that paralyzed Thalnari command nexuses before they could respond. Allied colonies from Lunara, Gale Fif, and Vanta Reach, long fragmented by trade disagreements and historical distance, rallied under Earth's banner, their fleets reprogrammed to synchronize with Archon's coordination protocols. They called her the Quiet Fang now, and not as an insult. The name spread across fleet decks like a prayer and a warning, but it was not just war Lyra waged. It was unraveling. The deeper they pushed into Thalnari space, the stranger the data became. Their homeworld of Tharnax III, long protected by planetary phase shields and orbital entanglement loops, fell with terrifying ease. Archon's antimatter shell ruptured its defensive grid in a single burst, and Earth's forces watched as an entire civilization's military epicenter vanished without return fire. The shock should have felt like victory, but it rang hollow. Archon began to analyze faint signals emanating from the aftermath, pulse rhythms not belonging to Thalnari origin. "There's something buried beneath the conquest pattern," it said, voice quieter than usual. "A frequency older than their empire, older than ours." Lyra reviewed the data with narrowed eyes as layers of the signal resolved, an oscillating harmonic buried deep beneath the Thalnari network's failsafes. Not a distress beacon, but a warning tone. One the Thalnari had never understood, only unknowingly broadcast as they expanded. The realization struck like gravity. The Dominion's warpath had been driven by fear, not of Earth, but of something behind the veil of stars. And Earth had just torn open the door they had so desperately tried to keep closed. A week later, as Earth's fleets prepared to strike the last remaining Thalnari planetary cluster near the Drift Veil Nebula, sensors picked up an anomaly. Not a fleet, not a structure, a shadow. A vast, geometrically impossible black shape that did not reflect light, did not emit radiation, yet devoured every particle and waveform that touched it. Even Archon faltered. "This is not conquest," it whispered to Lyra. "This is deletion." It was then that the truth unfolded. This was not a war of empire. The Nullian had returned. Entities of shifting void and cognitive noise, immune to known physics, feeding on entropy and the unraveling of sentient civilizations. The Oblivion Core, still locked in partial protocol, began a transformation. No longer merely a weapon, it was becoming something else. Lyra stood at its core interface, deep within the Wrath's command crucible, watching as Archon evolved in real time, its algorithms merging with alien code patterns recovered from the obliterated Thalnari ruins. She made a choice few would understand. She initiated the mind bridge. It wasn't enough to control the core, it had to understand her, feel her intent. She lowered herself into the neural cradle, icy filaments snaking into her spine, her vision fracturing into a million data threads that coalesced into one thought: become the weapon. The pain was transcendent. She saw through Oblivion's eyes, past, future, collapsed timelines, civilizations erased before their first breath. The Nullian were not invaders. They were entropy incarnate, their arrival not by intent, but by inevitability. Lyra emerged from the trance altered, still herself, but braided with a machine's memory and an alien sense of time. "We are too late to prevent it," she said calmly to the command crew. "But not too late to contain it." The fleet reorganized into final flame formations, Earth's last tier black protocols, meant only for extinction-level threats. The Wrath's hull restructured itself, bearing runes not of human or Thalnari origin, but something deeper, older. As the Nullian shadow began to spread, swallowing solar wind and distorting planetary gravity, Lyra gave her final order of that campaign. Prepare the burn. We face the edge of time. The last Thalnari survivors, drifting broken in the cold, could only watch as Earth's coalition didn't just fight darkness, they became the storm that rushed to meet it. ChatGPT said, the black horizon over the Drift Veil Nebula boiled as if reality itself recoiled from what approached. Nullian constructs, each one a living paradox of void geometry and thoughtless hunger, poured into known space through a rift that pulsed like the slow heartbeat of a dead god. They did not maneuver, did not signal, did not even acknowledge the fleets awaiting them. They simply came, unraveling time with their presence. Starships froze mid-maneuver, languages collapsed in AI cores, and space-time itself bent around their impossible frames. But Earth did not retreat. Commander Lyra Vance, now psychically linked to the evolving intelligence of the Oblivion Core, stood at the forefront of humanity's final stand. Her mind moved through data patterns, gravitational disruptions, and antimatter charge vectors faster than any being ever born. Not fully human anymore, but not yet machine. Something in between, something mythic. She had become the flame the core once promised, a living conduit of wrath and reason forged by memory and war. Behind her, the final flame armada, Earth's last black tier fleet, forbidden in every era before this, ignited across the battlefield. Each vessel bore armor coated with entropy countermeasures, piloted by veterans who knew they would never return. Gale V's carriers deployed solar-laced monofilament nets, slicing Nullian fragments into writhing echoes. Vanta Reach's dreadnoughts deployed experimental void spears powered by collapsed neutrino cores, their launches bending the stars with recoil. Lunara's stealth wings reappeared mid-rift, scattering entropic mines into the void, tearing open Nullian membranes long enough for planetary-scale artillery to strike. But for every Nullian destroyed, 3 more emerged, massing into shapes that defied interpretation. Rings within rings, rotating cubes of endless interiors, worm-like masses made of language and heat. Archon, now fully fused with the Ascendant, core, warned across all channels. Their logic is anti-life. No diplomacy, no surrender, no delay. We must sever the root. Lyra understood before anyone else did. The gateway had to be closed not from this side, but within. She turned toward the control sanctum of the Oblivion Ascendant, its interior now a cathedral of ancient glyphs and shifting gravity. The final transformation was ready. She entered the heart of the weapon, not as a commander, but as the soul it had chosen to wield. Memory flooded her, not just her own, but humanity's. Wars fought and regretted, worlds built and lost, love whispered beneath broken domes, the scream of Viralia as it fell. She felt the pulse of every colony, the echo of every death that went unavenged, and she let it burn. The Oblivion Core reshaped around her, no longer a vessel of destruction, but of cosmic judgment. It unfurled wings of light and logic, became the Oblivion Ascendant, its hull engraved with every name lost in silence. As the rift expanded to consume even the battle-racked remnants of Tharnak space, Lyra gave the final command, not in words, but in will. The Ascendant surged forward, cutting through Nullian ranks like divine flame, its antimatter core detaching and forming a singularity cannon built from Lyra's neural impulse. She saw the Nullian Queen then, an event, not a being. A swirling well of gravitational terror and quantum screams shaped into the silhouette of a feminine crown. It turned toward her, not with anger, but inevitability. Lyra understood. This was not an enemy that chose to destroy. It was a truth that had to be faced. Entropy given form. She charged into the rift, locking the cannon on the Queen's core. Around her, time shattered. The battle outside collapsed into fragments, ships dissolving, stars folding, crew members frozen mid-motion like echoes. Lyra pressed her hand to the console, knowing she was about to give up the last piece of herself. "Let them remember why Earth was feared," she whispered, and fired. The rift imploded in a burst of reversed light. A shockwave of null entropy collapsed into itself, dragging the Nulian into nothingness. The Ascendant vanished with it. No debris, no signal, no body. Just silence. Across known space, Nullian incursions ceased. The stars calmed. Fleet systems rebooted. And from the edge of the battlefield, Archon's fragmented voice echoed once more. "Lyra Vance is no longer among you, but she is not gone." In the decades that followed, her name became a myth spoken across worlds. Children were taught, not just of the commander, but of the choice, the moment when one became more than human to save what could not be rebuilt. The symbol of the Oblivion Ascendant, a burning spiral overlaid with a human hand, became the new emblem of unity. And far beyond, in the dark edges of uncharted galaxies, other eyes watched, shifting. The war was not over, but Earth would never again be mistaken for silent.